Welcome to the Healthy Black Family presentation on the Affordable Housing Preference Policy and Equity for Black Berkeley. We're happy to have you here, and we hope this will be an informative presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Ayanna Davis so she can open us up with a land acknowledgement and ancestor honoring, and then we'll hop into the presentation. Ayanna?
Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here and thankful today. And we will make this sweet and short. Giving thanks to the Almighty Creator of all life, known by many names, but only one, Ashe. Giving thanks for the divine energies, the sacred energies, the blessings of the universe that pour forth to us and through us. Ashe. Giving thanks for the elemental forces, the sun, the light, the wind, the air, the waters, this earth, giving thanks for this beautiful planet who nurtures and sustains us from the top of the mountains to the deepest ocean, to all the lands, and deeply into the molten center. Ashe. Giving thanks to and for our ancestors and ancestral relations, and all the relations from the east, the north, the west, and south. East, west, north, south, and in center. In center, we honor that which is above, and so it may be below. Ashe. We give thanks for the original ancestors, the original mother and father that came together in sacred union and brought forth life on the planet. Ashe. We give thanks for and to the ancestors that left us their words, their deeds, their actions, that we might know our greatness, and who resisted oppression, because never was there a time that we did not resist oppression. Ashe. We give thanks for the ancestors of the Middle Passage, documented by W.E.B. Du Bois, 60 million, and known to be 100 million. We call them the 100 million. Ashe. Giving thanks for and to the keepers of the land of the Turtle Islands that were here to greet us, work with us, join with us, and become family with us, who resisted. Ashe. Giving thanks for the freedom fighters over the centuries that have resisted oppression on this Turtle Island, who left us their words, their actions, their deeds, who conspired and resisted and worked toward liberation and freedom. Ashe. And to the fallen, we give special love this day. Recently lost an old friend, Majida Rahman. And then to my sons, Katari and Anthony, my political sons, Tupac Shakur, Javad Jahi, to our beloved sons and daughters in our community that we have lost, gone too soon, with special love to Burkina Faso and Alex Goodwin, to Rawa Negusi, to Juanita, to Linda, to all of the ones that have been gone too soon. May you rise in power. Ashe. Special love to my mother, Sarah. Ashe. My mother-in-law, Josephine. Ashe. And all the elders we have lost. And then to the unborn, those yet to come, or those who may have touched our womb for a moment. We work together and call you forth to join us as we build a world where you will be loved, cared for, held, and nurtured and nourished. To the unborn, Ashe. In this moment, let's take a breath and center ourselves in love of self and family, community, each other. Center ourselves in intentions to give our best and do our best, to be our best. Yes, and to continue to work together in unity for equity for Black Berkeley, and to love ourselves. And we send these intentions, this love, this gratitude, this thankfulness, this honoring out into the universe and back again. And as we do so, I invite you to add the name of someone you would like to honor today and every day, who you would like to walk with you on this path. As you add their names, we say Ashe. To those known and unknown, named and unnamed, Ashe. And we send this out and receive it many times over, the love that is present in this moment, by saying Ashe, Amin, and so it is. Again, thank you. I am honored to be here.
So as we transition, we'd just like to give you an idea of what our agenda is for today. We want to thank Mama Ayana for that welcome and land acknowledgement. We're going to start off with just a little bit of background for HBF, and then we'll hop right into the Affordable Housing Preference Policy. Mainly, our focus will be the Affordable Housing Preference Policy. As we talk about it, we'll talk about what is the Affordable Housing Preference Policy, how do preferences work for the Affordable Housing Preference Policy. There is a process for applying for certificates, and we will talk about who can apply, what is required, how these certificates impact preferences, and then we'll take a pause to allow you all to ask questions and get those questions answered. Then we're going to switch a little bit and we'll take a look at the affordable housing portal that's allows people to apply for housing in Alameda County. We'll go through the process of walking you through how to apply for housing in Berkeley using the preferences through the portal. And then we will again allow you to ask questions. And then if time allows, we'll cover at the end a little bit about equity for Black Berkeley and where we've landed with the community's priorities. So that's our agenda for today. So before we hop into the Affordable Housing Preference Policy, we'd just like to give you a little background about Healthy Black Families. Healthy Black Families is a nonprofit, community-based public health organization based in South Berkeley. Our mission is to provide people with knowledge, skills, and strategies to make social systems and policies more equitable for Black people and communities. We believe that when you empower those with the least and rise that tide, the whole community benefits. Our vision is to accomplish this mission through organizing individuals, families, and the organizations that serve them into communities, empowered with skills to advance social equity and justice, again with a focus focus on Black individual and families. As I came on to Healthy Black Families, so I could understand how to position my leadership, we did a values assessment, a values inventory. It's called the Hall Tone of Values Inventory. And through that, I gave every member of the organization at the staff level the survey, and then we rolled those values up into group values. We rebranded our website and really curated our presence in the community around our values. Our goal was that when people come to interact with us, they will feel what we are instead of something other than that. So as we did that, our primary collective value as an organization was human dignity. And in that, the definition is that we are conscious of and actively support the basic right of every human being to have respect and have their basic needs met so that each person has the opportunity to develop to their full potential. Another core value at Healthy Black Families is health and healing. As a public health organization, that makes great sense. We promote the wisdom of mind, body soundness that flows from meeting spiritual, emotional, and physical needs through self-awareness and preventative discipline. This includes an understanding that knowledge of self, cultural self-knowledge, allows for maintenance of internal balance that promotes positive feelings. And then a core value for community, which looks like fostering depth and commitment as we engage people, both as individuals and groups, so that both independent creativity and interdependent cooperation are maximized. All right, so let's move on to the affordable housing preference policy. All right, a lot of this I feel like I'm preaching to the choir because those of people who are attending this session are grounded in community in a way where we know this implicitly, that Berkeley has experienced a historical and unprecedented mass displacement of its Black residents and families. And this visual comes from enrollment of Black students in Berkeley Unified School District. The Black population in Berkeley dropped 13% since 2010 and 28% for families with children. You can just walk our streets and understand the impact. So what problems are we trying to solve with the affordable housing preference policy? First is systemic racist, profit-driven extraction of wealth from communities of color, resulting in people of color and families with children being displaced from the community. The cumulative loss of property value by Black homeowners due to the push out by environmental racism and subsequent gentrification since the 1960s. And this was a study done by the city of Berkeley early on in the Equity for Black Berkeley work. And they estimated it to be about $3.22 billion in 2020 of lost generational wealth due to these practices. And that's approximately $767,000 per homeowner. And then due to the historic racialized housing policies, Black residents of Berkeley continue to be the most vulnerable and impacted with ongoing threats of eviction, housing displacement, homelessness, separation from families, loss of generational homes and neighborhoods. Housing vulnerability impacts families in all of the social determinants of health, creating poverty and unstable communities. As we've been doing this work, it's been really interesting to understand what institutions shepherding this work are measuring. And one of the things we're trying to promote is qualitative measures about what it takes to have a resilient family. I don't see those kind of measures being used. So we're really seeking to see how we can disrupt the system a little bit with those types of insights. And then to protect the most vulnerable in the community, as Berkeley's density continues to grow, protections are needed. This is a very attractive community with a lot of outside interests. And so we are seeking ways to protect the people who live here. So as we look at housing for the most vulnerable, there is not a one-stop solution. It's more like a portfolio of solutions that we're trying to curate in order to address displacement. So, increasing the amount of affordable housing is one of those. Bond measures, preservation, etc. Rent control is another. Establishing policies that support ownership opportunities for low-income community members, things like TOPA and COPA, and then establishing preference policies to support displaced community members to return to Berkeley. And that's where the affordable housing preference policy falls. So producing more housing, preserving the housing we have that's affordable and rent restrictive, and then putting in place these protections. So a little history around how the housing advocacy that Healthy Black Families has been involved with. The Berkeley Black African American community, including leadership from Healthy Black Families and many other community-based organizations in Berkeley, and community members have been advocating and resisting displacement for decades. This work started in 2015 when Healthy Black Families began advocating for the right to return and repair for displaced community members in conversations with City of Berkeley leaders, in collaboration with organizations like Friends of Adeline, the African American Holistic Resource Center, the NAACP, and Berkeley Black Ecumenical Ministers Alliance. The City of Berkeley was putting forth the Berkeley Considers Community Survey and posed a question, who is an affordable housing preference policy for? And the response to that question was, this policy is intended to serve as a displacement intervention for African Americans who have been disproportionately impacted by displacement in Berkeley. This was really key as we moved the preference policy through the various aspects of the institution toward approval. We really had to continue regrounding in this purpose. Something that happens is often people say, oh, well, we need equity for all. But we were very focused on African American community members and making sure this policy inured to their benefit. So what outcomes does the affordable housing preference policy support? So it serves again as a policy, a displacement intervention. And it prioritizes new affordable housing for local community members and families who need access to stable, affordable housing. And it's intended to assist displaced community members to return to the community and be supported to stay. There was language in this policy as we began that really explicitly said it was for Black people in Berkeley. And as we moved to have the policy passed, that was language we had to take out. It was a compromise we made because Prop 209 threatened the passage of the policy if we used that language. But we haven't given up on that. I think it's still, people are working on moving the boundary of Prop 209 through lots of different means, and we're staying involved in those conversations. But at this point, there is no explicit language in the policy that says Black people. To lay the foundation for a fair and just housing policy, HPF supported the process. We held focus groups and focus and review groups. The organization implemented the right to return, right to stay, right to own survey that was targeted to the Black community and harvested their voice. And to create a fair and just housing policy that aligns with policy priorities, HBF collaborated with the East Bay Community Law Center Policy Link Fellow, now City of Berkeley employee Anna Cash, who was part of the Challenge Grant, and the San Francisco Foundation funded this in their first round of the Challenge Grant. So the second round of the San Francisco Foundation funding was called the Breakthrough Grant, and that's what has continued to fund healthy Black families to do this work through Equity for Black Berkeley, which we'll talk about a little later. So the Challenge Grant supported policy work for housing protection and preservation, in community outreach, engagement, and advocacy, implementation of the Berkeley Considers Affordable Housing Preference Policy Survey with Black families, community members, and partners. And the survey gathered data from the community about what preferences should Berkeley use to prioritize access to new affordable housing and prioritize how the city of Berkeley can develop the policy in a way that includes opinions of those impacted by displacement. HBF provided outreach for the survey implementation for the city of Berkeley. And yeah, we ran that through the month of January. I think that was 2018 or something like that. Okay. So the Affordable Housing Preference Policy will provide affordable housing opportunities for the most vulnerable. It's a fair and just policy that will sustain through administrations and city council groups. Yay. It will support the right to stay and right to return for generations of Berkeley citizens that have been priced out and been displaced or who are housing insecure and stand to lose their housing. We create access to affordable housing for Berkeley citizens and displaced residents by providing housing they can afford. And it's our attempt to uphold our collective value for human dignity as a community. Okay, so now we'll hop into what the Affordable Housing Preference Policy is and the preferences that it provides. The Affordable Housing Preference Policy gives people who have lost or at risk of losing their housing in Berkeley priority when new units become available. These preferences apply to a portion of new affordable housing units in Berkeley. So there are 5 preferences. The first is anyone who was displaced due to BART construction. And this is a multi-generational preference. So you, your parent, grandparent, or great-grandparent lost their homes due to construction of BART in the 60s and 70s. And that's one of the preferences for which you can receive a certification through the city of Berkeley. The second preference is you lost your housing due to foreclosure. You or a member of your household was displaced due to foreclosure in Berkeley since 2005. You can also receive a certificate through the city for this preference. The third preference is due to eviction. Due to a no fault or non-payment eviction in the Berkeley in the past 7 years. There's a preference for families with children. Your household has at least one child age 17 and under, and then homelessness or at risk of homelessness. You are eligible if either you are homeless in Berkeley or homeless with a previous Berkeley address, or are not already being are not already being prioritized for permanent supportive housing. Or you're at risk of homelessness in Berkeley. For example, you're staying with friends or family at a motel or hospital, or you've received an eviction notice or will imminently lose your housing. So applicants with preferences rank higher in affordable housing lotteries.
Yeah, could I jump in real fast?
Yes, please.
There's 2 preferences for current or former residents of redline neighborhoods. So there's one preference point if the applicant themselves is a current or former resident of Berkeley's redline neighborhoods in South and West Berkeley, parts of Central Berkeley. And there's another preference point if the applicant has a parent or grandparent who lives or lived in Berkeley's formerly redline neighborhoods. So just wanted to add those two in, and I can also drop the website into the chat that has those ones, and also links out to a map of the redline neighborhoods.
Thank you. Okay. Um, so preferences rank higher in the lotteries for affordable housing. So the preferences are applied to a portion of affordable housing units citywide. After applying for housing, the property manager uses a random lottery to order applicants in a waiting list. For units with preferences, property managers will then sort by the preference ranking. There's a point system for the preferences. And applicants with BART displacement certificates receive first priority in the lottery. Other applicants are sorted by the total number of preference points they have. So if you are certified for displacement due to BART, you automatically go to the top of the preference list. Okay. And we've talked a bit about this already. There are two certificates that are available for the Affordable Housing Preference Policy, one due to BART construction, and then one for foreclosure. And again, if you are certified and approved under the BART construction preference, you'll receive a certificate that gives you first preference in any affordable housing lottery. If you're approved under foreclosure, you'll receive one preference point, which combines with other categories of preferences, each one being worth 1 point each, and it gives you a higher ranking in the affordable housing lotteries. There's also information on the City of Berkeley Affordable Housing Preference Policy website about how to complete the certification process. Okay.
My name's Anna Cash, and I work at the City of Berkeley in Health, Housing, and Community Services on the housing policy team. And I'm gonna let my colleague Misty introduce herself too. I'm hoping we can take this one together a bit.
Hello, I'm Misty Garrett with the City of Berkeley, also on Housing and Community Services, and it's a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, so the preference policy, there's two kinds of well, there's many kinds of affordable housing in the city, but one type is housing, what we call housing trust fund housing, which is nonprofit affordable housing funded by the city's housing trust fund. And it's percent affordable units. So it's all it's a property with all the units are quote affordable housing, which we'll go more into. And then there's the below market rate program, or BMR, which is when there's market rate buildings and some of those units are affordable units. So the preference policy applies to both of those kinds of buildings. There's other kinds of affordable housing, and I know probably folks on this call know this info, but like permanent supportive housing, for formerly homeless folks, and other kinds of sort of specialized housing that wouldn't necessarily have the preference policy applied because people get those units through case management and different specialized queues based on their circumstances, not through an affordable housing lottery. So the preference policy applies to affordable housing that has affordable housing lotteries. And in terms of, what are the costs and how affordable is it? Misty, what do you think is the best way? I know it really varies by building, so I'm wondering what you think is like the best way we can share that information.
Um, yeah, it really varies by properties. So I think the biggest difference is when people hear affordable housing, they're thinking about rents that are tied to your income. So it's a percentage of your income. That's where you'll see a listing where it says there's a zero minimum income. Where affordable, like a tax credit, it's a fixed rent and the rent is below the market rent, but the market rents in the city are pretty high. So it may not seem affordable when you're looking at the numbers, but where you compare it to what the market rate rents are, the rents are below that market rate. So it's still considered low income housing based off of the low income limits for the area, but it may not be affordable to some people.
So there is no criteria for low income. And are people on Section 8 eligible for this?
Yes, people on Section 8 are eligible for this. In terms of Misty, my understanding is Section 8 vouchers can be applied to most affordable housing
All
units.
right.
Yeah. And in terms of, are there any criteria for what's considered affordable housing? Those criteria are tied to area median income, as Misty mentioned. So 30% of area median income is considered extremely low income. These are just like terms from the affordable housing industry. 50% of area median income is considered very low income. And then, you know, between 50 to 80% of area median income is considered low income. So sometimes you'll see those phrases used instead of the percentage of area median income. So I think it's important to share both so that folks know what that's referring to when they see it. And Mina just shared, thank you, Mina, some income limits in the chat, and these are from the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee. And Misty had mentioned tax credits too. The low income housing tax credit program is how most affordable housing is funded, I believe, throughout the country. And so this is a good kind of reference for this year, 2024, for Alameda County. Although, as Misty said, it does vary by property what the specific income limits are.
Omawale?
Thank you for having this session and thank you all for participating. My question has to do with how one goes about physically applying for the preferences. Now, I have gone through the literature that was there with the various links, and some of the links were not working. This was back in July 2024. I don't know if those links have been reignited or what, but I do know that if you fit a certain category, and you know, whether it was the redlining one or the BART one or the one where you had a Berkeley address and then became homeless, all of those links were not active. So now I'm asking, because we want to try to get more people to apply, and I'm thinking in terms specifically of the Maudel Miller Sherrick building on Adeline and Ashby, which was supposed to open in May, has since been deferred to September and is now scheduled to open in November. However, those people who are out waiting for their lottery number to come up, would they be allowed to apply at this late date for those preferences? And how would they do that? Do they send a letter? Do they send an email? Do you call? Is there a link? Do they go by some office or something? What do they do?
Yeah, so Resources for Community Development, RCD, is managing the Maudel Miller
Okay.
Sherrick community process, that building, and those applications are closed for now until there's, vacancies in the future and they reopen a wait list. But for preferences in general, there's two that you can, as Mina mentioned, apply for a certificate for at any time. So that's displacement due to BART construction and the
Mhm.
foreclosure certificate. And
Mhm.
the links should all be working. I put in the chat the website that has the links to the certificate application. And I also put our contact info at the city if you ever notice that a link isn't working so that we can fix it.
Okay.
And then for other preferences, all the other preferences except for those two, you indicate as part of the application to a specific building that you would qualify for those. And then if you're moving forward in that process, you get contacted to verify your eligibility. So there's no kind of, other than the two, BART displacement and foreclosure, where there's certificates, there's nothing to do to apply for the preference until you're in a specific affordable housing building application process.
So if you're in the application process and you've received notification that you have a wait list number and so forth and so on,
Yeah.
the next step is to apply for the preference?
Yeah, the
Is
next
that what you're
step is
saying?
that the property manager for that building would share with you a preference verification application where you would specifically indicate, how you qualify for that preference and provide any additional supporting documentation that's needed.
Okay.
And on that application, which is something that was created by the city, there's also resources for if you aren't able to access some of that documentation, how might you go about that, or how can the city help with some of that?
Okay. That's been my ongoing question for quite a while now. Not only in the instances where my clients have been in varying stages of displacement, but also personally in terms of what I'm trying to find in terms of a house for me. And I'm not sure if that applies, if the AHPP applies to single family homes, or does it apply to new buildings that have been put up? Because we understood from, I guess, 2022, 23, that the city of Berkeley had 1,500 viable units that had not been made available to the public to rent, and that they were going to enforce a penalty on those people who own those, but who had not tried to offer those available to those people who were in need.
You're referring to the vacant units that the vacancy
Vacant
tax
units.
would apply to?
Yes.
Yeah. I think much of my understanding is a lot of what was quantified there is units that are on the private market.
Okay.
The
Okay.
affordable housing preference policy only applies to nonprofit affordable housing that the city has helped to fund,
Okay.
or below market rate units in new market rate buildings that the city has deed restricted, meaning the city has some regulatory capacity in terms of the rents that can be charged on them. So, and it only became effective January 1, 2024. So it's for new buildings that are going up as of the beginning of this year.
Okay. Thank you for that, because I don't think many people understood that AHPP only applied to nonprofit. I think they thought that it applied to all properties across the board in the city of Berkeley. That makes a very, very clear distinction and gives you options for,
Yeah.
taking other actions.
Yeah, so it's nonprofit and then below market rate housing. So when you
Okay.
see new buildings go up that are sort of
Mhm.
mostly market rate, but they have some subset of the units that are required to be affordable units, those would
Mhm.
also get it. So those kind of like, yeah, some of those new buildings that are going up downtown and
Okay.
things like
Thank
that.
you very much. That's
Yeah,
great.
and there are a few that are about to have listings come up on the portal.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Nina, I see a few in the chat that I could answer. I don't want to take up feel free
Yeah.
to
Yeah, great.
So I see this question about having been displaced from Berkeley and living in a redlined community. So that's one of the preferences that doesn't have a specific certificate process that you would do in advance, but we're going to go through soon an example listing on the Alameda County Housing Portal to show how it works in practice when you're applying for a new building in Berkeley that has the preferences, where you would indicate that. So, like I was saying, it's not like a thing you would get on a list for in advance, but it's when you're applying for a specific building, you can indicate that you are eligible for that preference, and that would be, you would get that preference point.
So I have a question. I know you're reading it, Anna. I could emote it. I was just thinking, is there a differentiation in term or in categorization or in both between those who fall below what I think there's is it very, very low or poverty income level according to the area median numbers, but do not have Section 8? Can someone like that apply for quote unquote affordable housing?
So, Misty, help me out.
Yeah.
I was gonna
Um,
see, you go ahead. Yeah.
yeah. So if someone is probably extremely low income, so that would be the 30% income limit or below. Could you afford affordable housing unit? That would depend if it's a property that has minimum income requirements. So some of the fixed rent, low income buildings, such as a tax credit building, the rents are below the market rate, but there would be like a minimum income requirement. More than likely, if you're in the extremely low category, you may not qualify for those units. You may not be able to afford it if you're below. But there's also units at some of the buildings where it may be project-based Section 8 through the Berkeley Housing Authority or through a housing authority. For those units, it will say 30%, but it will be based off of your income, and there will not be a minimum. So it's important when you're looking at the listing to look at what the minimum income requirements are, and then plus the rent.
Yeah, and that'll be sometimes phrased as project-based voucher or PBV. And it's something to look out for because, yeah, Missy, a Section 8 voucher, sometimes called a housing choice voucher, comes with you, obviously, and you take it to a property. A project-based voucher is attached to that specific unit. So if someone's at the extremely low income level, they might want to keep an eye out for a project-based voucher because that's attached to the unit. There's no minimum income, and you would pay 30% of whatever your income is. Not I wish there were more units that were project-based vouchers. It's usually the units are at a nonprofit affordable building and many are not, but it's a good thing to keep an eye out for. And I'm going to drop into the chat Alameda. It's another place to look for affordable housing. It's called, let's see, what's it called? AC Housing Choice.
Yeah, ACE
Yeah.
Housing Choices.
Because they do have a filter for, dropped it into the chat, where it says, I'm going to screen share really quick just to share this info. So for AC Housing Choices, it's linked to on the housing portal. They're both kind of similar resources, but when you go to the rent, you could select percent of renters' income so that you just see those units that work that way.
Oh,
You
that's
would just-
extremely helpful.
yeah. So there's, we'll talk more about the Alameda County Housing Portal. I think they're still taking feedback on how they can improve their process. And I think one thing would be to have a filter like that on there as well.
So, hi, and I can't raise my hand, so I'm just coming in. Um, if I'm hearing correctly, we have, when you apply, from what I'm seeing, what I saw at RCD, they had a certain number of units set aside for Section 8. They had a certain number of units set aside for unhoused, or also known as our homeless community. And then the rest of the units were based on income qualification. And as you applied through the housing portal, which I think they received well over 9,000 applications. And then through that, as part of the application process, you applied for your housing preferences. And then they put together a lottery out of that group. And then they assigned people according to their preferences. So what I understand is I could I could qualify for all 7 preferences, right? And still I would be put on a lottery. But I would go to the top of the list based on my preferences. Okay, just making sure we understand that. That's complicated, and I really commend you all for dealing with this in the in a time of emergency, and for people, where people are dying on the streets, as we try to get people housed, and knowing that there aren't many units that are going to come open till we get the next affordable housing project set up, which is what, in 2 years we expect for those houses to come open. Otherwise, it's going to be 1 or 2 at a time, that's available through our providers. And then after that, it's North Berkeley BART. And then after that, it's Ashby BART, correct? And we'll have hundreds of units available with those developments.
And I just want to chime in, we really want to use the portal also when there's an open wait list. So as people are moving out of these affordable units, so then there's one place. So are able to look for those units and you're able to apply. If the property does not have a wait list, a lot of times they're left with a pretty huge wait list, but that's not always the case, and they need to replenish the wait list. So we really want the portal to be open for existing properties, new properties, just a one-stop shop for affordable housing.
So this also means that if I have a Section 8 voucher and I'm applying for a privately owned building, I will not get a preference, correct?
You still could, if it's a below, you're talking about a private. So, sorry. So there's the kind of like private market buildings that, someone asked about single family homes before and stuff. It wouldn't apply to that. But if there are BMR units, the below market rate units in the new market rate buildings, then the city has regulatory agreements with those developers to restrict a certain number of units to be affordable. And yes, somebody for those units could come in with their Section 8 voucher and still have the preferences applied to prioritize them if they've got these, ties to Berkeley and displacement experiences.
So these are new units that are opening up and old units that are opening up?
Just new units.
Okay, all right.
Someone asked in the chat about announcements, so I'm dropping our city's affordable housing resources page.
Thank you.
On there, you see a big button with Berkeley Affordable Housing Newsletter. So that's going to be any affordable housing listings that are coming up in Berkeley, whether it's a new building or an existing project that's reopening their wait list, has some vacancies. We're going to send out newsletters there. We do. And then the other thing is the Alameda County Housing Portal. There's also a link on that same page to that, because on there you would want to get on their list as well, which I can screen share when we talk about the portal, because that's going to be anything, any affordable housing openings within the county.
If I may, I have not a question, but sort of a comment. I checked with the Berkeley Housing Authority about 2 weeks ago to ask about their Section 8 applications and whatever. Those have been closed for quite a while. They don't see an opening about when they're going to reopen their Section 8 applications for individuals. Not the project-based ones, but the individual ones that you talked about a moment ago. How does someone who does not have a Section 8 from Berkeley, but wants to live in Berkeley with a Section 8 from outside of Berkeley, in California, but outside of Berkeley, how would they access AHPP preferences?
So someone would vouch, was someone else about to answer? Oh, okay. Yeah, if someone has a voucher from outside of the area, they can port it into Berkeley.
Mhm.
But they would have to contact the housing authority to see if they are accepting vouchers from out of the area.
Okay.
And if someone is applying with a voucher, say it's a new affordable property and they qualify for preferences, but they have a
Mhm.
voucher, them having a voucher will not impact them being able to get preferences, even at affordable property, because it's not a project-based unit. The
Right.
voucher would be used even in the more expensive affordable units. Having a voucher really is a leverage to get in some of these affordable properties, because you
Mhm.
can use Section 8 vouchers for some of the higher price units, like a below market rate unit where the rents may be higher. The
Right.
housing authority more than likely will pay, that higher rent, versus if one of us applied for those, that rent will look high to us, but not to a voucher holder.
Mhm.
So as long as Berkeley is accepting applications, you can port in from another city, from another state as well. We've had a couple
Okay.
to port in, mostly from Oakland, but you can port in.
Yes. Okay.
And I just helped someone port in just this past couple of weeks. I mean, they found a place within a month. It's,
Yes.
because they used the housing authority list that, you pick up at the housing authority office.
Mhm.
As a board member, I can't talk a lot about each individual, but I can say that they ported in from Oakland, and the housing authority was very efficient in making sure they got their inspection, got everything taken care of within a month's time. And I think that if we can get people, if they're, maybe in the future, we can create a way for people who have Section 8 vouchers to go through the preferences as part of the housing authority process. Matter of fact, I think I'm gonna put that on the agenda for next month's meeting.
Good.
Yeah, I think that's important because it gets murky. So I'd like to ask questions from the chat. Peace asks, greetings everyone. I'm a current resident of the Red Line South Berkeley region and have been renting for almost 20 years. Forward looking for a pathway to a below market rate first time home ownership through
Mhm.
AHPP.
Mhm.
Is there an affordable housing preference policy application process for such a thing? And if so, how does one embark on that process?
So there is not at this time, but there should be. And I know there is a referral from city council to study more, or to develop, more affordable home ownership options. but it hasn't been funded by council yet. So that's something, you know, staff I think would love to work on. So yes, but not at this time. But, you know, especially when we talk about, just speaking personally, like if this is supposed to be reparative, looking at the harm done, you know, people owned homes, obviously, that were displaced by the BART construction. So we need to think about what does affordable home ownership look like. And that's very challenging. I think, you know, Berkeley has some of the highest, like above asking prices in the country and just some of the highest housing costs, but
Definitely.
we need to, yeah, think creatively about it. And Misty, I know there is some BMR home ownership in theory, but that I don't believe anything. You might know more about that history, those numbers.
Yeah, they don't come available that often. I think the last BMR home ownership property maybe was almost 5 years ago, where a new one opened. So currently, we do not even have a place where people could look for a below market rate homeownership unit. That's definitely something we would like to work on. Hopefully, it could go on the portal at some point, similar to San Francisco, where you can search for below market rate units for rent or also for purchase. But we just haven't worked on that yet. Ideally, it would be a great place for it to be on the portal, because then if someone is listing their current below market rate unit that they own for sale, there's still restrictions on the resale price. So it would be a discount. That would be helpful for people to be able to find affordable units. But it's not single family homes, but you know, it could be a townhouse or as long as, but currently we do not have that. That's definitely something we're thinking about in the future, and applying preferences would be right in line with that.
Yeah. I know HBF is also in the process of attempting to make those a reality. Omawali, I'm not sure if you got a response for this, but I think it's a key question that you put in here about timelines for applying for
Yes.
the preferences.
Right.
Now, I know there's some that you can pre-apply for and be certified and hold it in hand, and
Okay.
others have to do more with each time you put in an application, which is cumbersome. Can you clarify?
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
For BART,
most of those are online, is that not correct?
yeah.
They're
But
mostly online.
yeah, well, and we can take a look at the Alameda County Housing Portal where those online applications are. Some of those also have a paper application option. But the online is set up for mobile as well. And it's a pre-application, so it's a shorter application. Um, and yes, as Deb said, there's the BART construction displacement certificate or the foreclosure in Berkeley certificate, and those can be applied for at any time. And then the other preferences you apply as part of your process of applying for a specific building on the portal.
So if you wanted to access one of the managers of a specific building,
Yeah,
would you go to the AC portal
that's correct.
for
Yeah,
that?
it shows up on, like, I'm looking for it, the right-hand side of any listing, just who
Okay, great.
their name and their email and phone number.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
So as part of our next process, we're actually going to walk through a demonstration of the housing preference of the portal. So hopefully that will answer many of these questions.
Thanks.
So another question is, are there any programs that can give priority to extremely vulnerable populations, for instance, elders, people with terminal illness, domestic violence survivors, and families with children? So
And the disabled.
families with children is one of the preferences, right? But the rest, I'll let you take over, Hannah.
Yeah,
And
and
please add the
Misty and I,
disabled as well. The disabled as well.
Yeah, we can answer this together, but there are specific properties for senior housing. There are different programs. So within a property that's say 100% affordable units funded by the city's housing trust fund, there are often a certain number of units that are set aside for specific, especially vulnerable populations. So a good example would be in Maudel Miller Sherritt community. I believe I forget the exact number, but there's a number of units from the funded by the No Place Like Home program for formerly homeless individuals. And so those units are set aside for those folks. So sometimes there's that case where it's a broader building with lots of different kinds of folks living in it, but there's units set aside for especially vulnerable populations. And then in other cases, there's whole buildings that are just for those groups. And so I forget the names of different programs right now, but there are some for people who are disabled. There's HOPWA for people living with AIDS. So there's a lot of different programs where there's either going to be units set aside in a specific building or a whole building that is just for that population. And right on the portal, it's always going to say when there are those kinds of, sometimes they're called set asides. But Misty, please add anything that you think's important.
Yeah, usually the population, the special populations in some of these properties are elders. Definitely buildings that are for disabled applicants, and then like Anna mentioned, within a property it may be a percentage of the units that maybe for a very specific disability, like maybe hearing impaired, or and that's why it's important to read the listing to see what you may qualify for. There is a priority that is given to those units, especially if you're disabled and you require one of those units that are that meets the qualifications for your disability. If you indicate that on your application, they have to make you part. You have to be prioritized when they're looking at the list of applicants. So that is definitely a way to, when you're applying for housing, make sure you indicate all of these, anything that may allow for a priority for the unit. I haven't seen any case where someone with terminal illness, and usually that's because most of these buildings are for independent living. There is the Violence Against Women Act, where someone can use like a VAWA in order to move into a building, but that's if they're currently living in, say, one subsidized building and they need to escape that and move to another. So there are specific things that might help someone get into a unit, prioritize, but it just depends on the building as well.
Thank you, Misty. I think that handles most of the questions. I just want to flag that Karma, who had to leave, had a similar question to Pieces, and I'm curious if you have a component for those of us Berkeley residents like me who currently live in affordable housing but want to be able to buy a home in Berkeley but have it be affordable. So that sounds like it's a subset, right? Pieces was I'm in a formerly redlined, and Karma's is I'm already in affordable housing. But similar answer, I guess, right? We're working on it.
And this is what I talk about then when I talk about curating a portfolio of housing resources that would be able to address, the whole landscape of need. And we're not there yet. We're still bolting that together. And that's part of what we'll be continuing to work on as we go forward. So I think now's a good time to switch gears and move into looking at the housing portal. If all minds are clear around what we've done so far, and keep collecting your questions. There's another period for question and answers once we do this exploration.
Thanks, everybody. So let's take a look at the Alameda County Housing Portal. Are you all seeing my screen with the apply for affordable housing in Alameda screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, the Alameda County Housing Portal is an online platform where people can apply for affordable housing that's in Alameda County. It's run by Alameda County's Housing and Community Development Department, working with Eden INR. That's who administers it. And I will put their contact email into the chat if anyone has questions or thoughts about the portal itself. So here at the city, we're trying to get more and more of the listings onto the portal because the goal of the portal is really to be a one-stop shop to apply for affordable housing. And also the housing portal is how we implement the preference policy. So for new buildings where the preference policy is applied, those are going to have to be on the so some of the aspects of how it works is that a common application saves your data for future applications, so that you can save time and complexity. The listings are shown clearly and concisely, and I'll go through one in a second. And it works well on mobile, which is really important because that's how most people access it. And it takes on average just a few minutes to apply for a listing in terms of people submitting it from start to finish. So when you sign up right here, this get emailed whenever a new listing is posted, then you would get, that's right here, you would get contacted anytime a new affordable housing listing is posted on the portal in Alameda County. So that's a really good list to get on, or for, for your clients to get on. And so a little bit more about how the process works. If you go here to get assistance, and we can read about how it works. Basically, first step is to find apartments accepting applications. And we talked a little bit about like other places to look, and I'll go into this in a second. The next step is to check eligibility. So as Misty was saying, that can really vary by building. So this includes population requirements, part of what we were just talking to in terms of some of the units are designated for specific populations like seniors, people with developmental disabilities, transition age youth, different kinds of special needs, formerly homeless individuals. So this is just, important to check if your household has anyone with who meets those criteria, there are special units set aside. And then income requirements really does vary by property, but this section has some good information on how to check. And the income minimums and maximums are listed on the specific property listings. And then Mina went over the preferences. Some of the cities, this is just going over the fact that some cities have preferences like Berkeley does. And that, you have to check your eligibility for those too. I see some chats are coming up, but it's hard for me to see them.
Anna, so
Yes.
an important one is that the print is too small. Is there a way
Oh,
you make the
thank
view a
you.
little bit large? Thank you.
Thank you for that.
There
Is
we
there
go. And the
anything
rest
else
can wait.
time sensitive? Okay, cool. Thanks, Deb. So apply online. So as I mentioned, the online application is a short pre-application that asks for high-level information, and we'll go through an example in a minute. And one of the things that pre-application includes is the preferences. So that's where you're going to indicate whether you qualify for preferences on a specific building's pre-application. And the listings will indicate whether they use a lottery, and most of them do. If it has the preferences applied, that's a lottery. So the important thing is not to get in the application quickly, but just to make sure the information's accurate and that it's in before the deadline. And they all have really clear deadlines at the top. And then getting the results. After you submit an application, you might be contacted by the property manager at that point to provide documentation on income and finances, as well as the documentation demonstrating preference eligibility. So that's the stage at which you would provide the more in-depth info. At first, you're just indicating whether or not you qualify. And then get prepared for placement is the final step. If you're notified you're moving forward in the application process, there's going to be, a step of meeting with the property manager and submitting those documents, reviewing them together. So just one other quick thing before we go into the example list. I just want to flag that not all of the listings are on the portal since it is still a newer tool. So in Berkeley as I mentioned, for properties that are required to implement the AHPP, they'll need to be on the portal moving forward. But just, since we're talking also about looking for affordable housing broadly, if you are looking for affordable housing in the county, working with clients who are, some of the other resources are here. So on the Get Assistance page of the portal, and we'll put all these links in the chat, you go to Additional Housing Opportunities and Resources, click that link. And that's where there's going to be some additional resources on immediate housing assistance, different programs in HCD at Alameda County. So that includes a down payment loan assistance program in the county. I know we've been talking about affordable homeownership, as well as some other programs, links to the housing authorities throughout the county, etc. And then I'll also put in the chat again, the Affordable Housing Resources page, which I'll make bigger, of City of Berkeley, which also has some additional resources. So it's got the portal, but it's also got Alameda County Housing Choices, which I screen shared previously as another search tool that even though things are supposed to be moving to the portal, sometimes it does have some listings that the portal might not have. So want to flag that. And then here on the city's affordable housing resources page, these are some of the most common affordable housing providers within the city of Berkeley, particularly SAHA and RCD are good ones to check their websites, because for some of their older properties that aren't required to implement the preference policy because they predate it, those might not yet be on the portal, but maybe they have a wait list opening. So it's important to check this. And me and Misty and colleagues worked on revamping this affordable housing resources page not long ago. So definitely welcome feedback on it, and also hoping it's kind of, more timely and helpful. And then this big button, once again, is where you can sign up to be notified of any new affordable housing listings in Berkeley from the city's newsletter, including some that might not be using the portal yet, though over time we hope that almost all of them will be up there, so it really can be a one-stop shop. Okay, I'm gonna pivot to the test listing, unless we want to pause for questions about the portal broadly. I think I'll go through the test listing. Let me just log into it.
I just saw on the side of the portal that there was assistance for first-time home buyers. Is that realistic?
That might have been the Alameda County, what's called AC Boost, the down payment assistance program. And people have had success using that program. I think my understanding is that it's been challenging to use the program in Berkeley because of just how high the housing costs are, because it's, they're giving specific amounts for down payment assistance. I don't know all the numbers for other cities. I know people have used it in Oakland and other parts of the county, and that it's been more of a challenge in Berkeley.
Oh, so the people asked questions about that. So I wondered if that was a resource, but not really in Berkeley.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's definitely a resource broadly, though. I personally know people who've used it. And, I think that one part of, I mentioned before that there was some council direction to work on affordable homeownership. One thing they mentioned was in that referral would be, could Berkeley have a program that would sort of close the gap between what the county offers for down payment assistance and what you would need to actually buy a home in Berkeley? So that's one idea. But yeah, I think it's been a real challenge to use it in Berkeley, given just how expensive the home purchase prices are now. Okay.
Yeah, and that down payment assistance really says nothing about the ongoing overhead it's going to take to maintain that house, you know, and make those payments at that rate and amount.
Okay. All right. I am in now. Are you all seeing this test listing? Yes, okay, great. Sorry for the delay.
No.
Okay, so this is fake and the incomes and rents need work too. So try not to, I'm gonna give them that feedback to make it more accurate. I'm gonna make it bigger, but just wanted to flag that this is not real. So we won't get too hung up on the info that's in there. But I think it's gonna be helpful for us to just see the process. So, and how the preferences are incorporated into it. So it gives information, so you can just familiarize with how the listings look, gives information on which units are available, how many, right, of the different types, what is the minimum income, what the rents would be, and then eligibility. So what is the maximum incomes at different household sizes? And then what are the household sizes that correspond to the different unit types? Some information about rental assistance. And then it goes through and explains each preference so that people have that info up front. And Mina already went through those, but we'll go through them in more detail, going through the actual application. And then at the bottom, there's always going to be like an overview of the different amenities. It's usually a little more detailed than this, made up example. And then where exactly it is, so that you can see on the map. And then if we scroll back up, on the right-hand side, always on the top is going to be the due date, with the time, and then how many units this is actually applying to, the application button, and what to expect. This has some good info. It explains the lottery. It explains that all of the info from the application will need to be confirmed. And it explains this line, for properties with housing preferences, if we cannot verify a housing preference that you have claimed, you will not receive the preference, but will not be otherwise penalized. So that's just kind of saying, if you put something and then later it's not possible to demonstrate it, that application gets resorted based on the total number of preference points that applicant can verify for. And that's to confirm that this policy is actually, benefiting who it's designed to serve. And then someone had asked about the property management information. That's always on the right-hand side, name, number, and the email address. So let's get started on our made-up application. And I'm gonna go a little more quickly through the first steps so that we can just kind of get to the preferences. But yeah, it tells you what to expect. So you're gonna give info about the household size and who's in your household, income info, and preference info. Applicants are entering into a lottery. Yeah, explains that about preferences again, that they'd need to be verified. So I will just put some basic info here. You can also check off if you don't have an email address, you can put that there. And then you do phone number. You can add extra phone numbers, and there's also going to be a spot that asks about like if you're working with a case manager. Here you select how you prefer to be contacted. So I said I didn't have an email, so give me a call. I'm going to put no for a lot of things so that we don't get asked extra questions right now. So just know that in the interest of time. And that's just correcting the address I put. Okay, is there someone else you'd like to authorize us? So that can be your family member or friend who's helping, or a client of yours can put case manager. I'm going to put I don't have an alternate contact. who is going to be living there? I'm going to put it all live alone so we can get to the preferences. What unit sizes are you interested in? This would typically be based on the number of people who live in the unit, but they ask you to provide your preferred size for determining your preference in this opportunity or for establishing a wait list for this specific property.
Anna, but this is where, excuse me for interrupting. This is
No.
where earlier on in the application listing where it says the amount according to the unit, right? Right? The amount of people. So in
Yeah.
other words, that's the maximum amount. Like in a studio, you cannot have more than 3 people living, or right?
Right. On the listing, yeah, it has that info about like this is how many people can live in the different unit sizes. Thank you, Deb. Yeah. This is where you would indicate if anyone in your household needs specific ADA accessibility features. Interest of time, I'm gonna put no. Do you anticipate changes in your household in the next 12 months in the number of people? Is someone in your household a full-time student or going to turn 18 years old within 60 days? And do you or anyone on this application, excuse me, receive any of the following? Housing vouchers like Section 8, non-taxable income like SSI, SSDI, child support payments, or workers' comp benefits, rental subsidies like Vouch, HSA, HOPWA, Catholic Charities, Aid Foundation, etc. Okay.
That
Yes.
raises a question for me. I have clients who are veterans and they have veterans vouchers for housing. How
Yeah.
would they be given a preference in AHPP, or are they set aside because they're already veterans with a preference already established?
So, Misty, maybe you can help me out. So I know that Bosch is the veterans.
Gosh, that's the one,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there they would be indicating that they have that voucher to help them pay their rent. In terms of preferences, if there's a project-based voucher, I know that those also have another set of preferences through the housing authority. And
Okay.
I'm not recalling right now if veterans is one of them or not, but that would be something to check on. And I don't know if anyone on this call knows.
Right.
Yeah.
But if there were units through the housing authority, they could not use that, their own personal, subsidy on those units. So they would be able
Yes.
to, be included in the preference,
Okay.
for preferences, because you can't use a voucher, housing choice voucher in a project-based unit. So they
Okay,
will be
good.
using that for units that will be included in the preference. But, unless they were in some other program that
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
prioritized them, like if they were a homeless veteran and there was their part coordinated entry somehow, then
Yes.
it's possible they wouldn't qualify for a preference if that was the case.
And
Okay.
Omawale, I don't know if
Mhm.
you already know about the home key program. That's something from the state where they're, you
Right.
know, converting some of these hotels to permanent supportive housing. The just to mention, like this is separate, but the latest round of that, I forget how much money. It's a lot of money at the state level, and half of it is set aside for homeless veterans. So I know there's going to be probably more set asides coming down in some of those properties for veterans specifically.
Okay. I do know that the home key program, which I can't remember which, there was another term for home key before it became home key, but that was related to the COVID situation where they had people in the in hotels on hotel vouchers because they were at risk of COVID, and that included the veterans. After those hotels closed, we weren't sure exactly how veterans were being handled. And so that pushed them back into Vosh and some of the other veterans housing, but we didn't have a clear sense of what eligibility things they had available for their own issues.
Yeah. I don't know the details, but it's something to look out for with Home Key because that funding I think is gonna all be released next year. Okay, so just here's where you indicate either per month or per year. You just need to say which. And then now we're on to preferences, and this is the last part of the application. So your household may qualify for the following housing preferences. If you qualify for this preference, you'll get a higher ranking. So displacement due to eviction. Your household can receive preference for housing if you or a member of your household has been displaced due to no fault or non-payment related eviction in Berkeley within the past 7 years. If you qualify for this preference and are selected for an interview, be prepared to provide an eviction notice. So it kind of gives a heads up about the kind of documentation someone would be required to provide in the future. But at this stage, for the pre-application, you're just checking off whether that applies to you. So you could say, I or a member of my household was displaced due to no fault or non-payment related eviction within the past 7 years in Berkeley, or no one in my household was displaced this way. Okay, so for BART, historical BART displacement, your household can receive preference for housing if someone in your household or someone you are the direct descendant of was displaced due to construction of BART stations in the 1960s and 1970s in Berkeley. It says of Berkeley's BART stations. If you think you qualify, please apply as soon as possible for the BART construction displacement certificate. And then that links out to that certificate application. But you can also apply that either you already have it or you're gonna get it, or that doesn't apply to you.
Or something, yeah.
Same thing with foreclosure. It's structured very similarly because it also is a certificate process. So your household can receive preference for housing if you or a member of your household has been displaced due to the foreclosure of a property owned in Berkeley since 2005. If you think you qualify, please apply as soon as possible for a certificate from the city of Berkeley and indicate your certificate status below. So again, that links out to the foreclosure application. But maybe we should note here that those are available like on the City of Berkeley's preference page, because one thing is when you link out, so many people are using these on mobile, that's obviously challenging too. So we can maybe say Google that or something too, because but yeah, it is a way for someone to get it. And also when they get contacted by a property manager, they are going to provide that information to get the certificate. And we review those at the city and we can review them more quickly if we know someone's in an active housing process, of course. So even if somebody doesn't click right from their pre-application and go get it, that's not a problem necessarily. Okay, so homeless or at risk, your household may receive preference if you or another household member are currently homeless in Berkeley, or you're homeless and had a previous address in Berkeley and you're not already being prioritized for permanent supportive housing, or if you're facing risk of homelessness in Berkeley. So it explains a little bit more. This is at risk. You have somewhere to stay, but it isn't permanent. So that could be staying with friends and family, friends or family living in a hotel, motel, medical or other facility, or you've received an eviction notice or will otherwise imminently lose your current residence. For homelessness includes living in a public or private place, not meant for human habitation, such as outside or in a car, staying at a shelter, or living in an institution for 90 days or less when your prior residence was an emergency shelter or a place not meant for human habitation. So kind of standard definitions. And you can get the point for being either homeless or at risk. It's one or the other. And then households with children, this is the most straightforward one. It's kind of, you've already provided earlier on in this pre-application information about who is in your household. So that's something that they can verify using that information. I guess I said no earlier, so I'll say no again. Descendants of residents of redline neighborhoods. So your household can receive preference for housing if you or another household member have a parent / guardian or grandparent who lives or formerly lived in a red line neighborhood in Berkeley. So if you can click out to see where that is, and then search within the map. So I'll put our office address and it'll pop up with oops. Let's see, 2180 Lilia Street. And I would click on that search result, and that isn't in the redlined area. But it shows me this point address locator so I can see. And then if I saw that it was, I would say, yeah, at least one of my parents or grandparents lives or lived in a formerly redlined neighborhood of Berkeley. I would put their full name. I would say, that's my mom. And then what was her specific address? I would put all that information into here. I'm going to say I don't qualify for now. And then same exact deal for if you yourself are a resident or former resident of red light neighborhood. So yeah, so this applies also to people who have been displaced from those areas, which are the areas in our city that have seen the highest rates of displacement, right? So it's for a current or former resident of a red line neighborhood. And it's going to be the same process. If you say yes, you're going to put your name and address that you live or lived. And we'll say no for now. And again, the link to the map.
And Anna,
Yes.
the one that you just did and the one prior, they don't have a time limit. It's if you've ever lived in
Yeah,
those.
that's correct. Then.
That's
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. And
And
then,
with that, I have a question.
yeah.
Because some people, it is a long time. What kind of documentation, are you going to get to that later? What kind of documentation is valid and what is not valid?
Let me get to that in a minute.
Yeah, later. That's fine. I just want to put
I'll
out
pull
there.
that up. Okay, so yeah, then there's just some questions, some optional questions about race and ethnicity, and then how you heard about it. And then I think once you submit, it gives you all the info to review and confirm, and then it's gonna summarize everything for you. So applicants are applying to enter a lottery, sort of just a little bit about like once this period closes, they get placed in lottery rank order. If you're contact for an interview, you provide more info. All info you've provided will be verified, your eligibility confirmed. For properties with housing preferences, again, that caveat that it has to be verified, and for more info, contact that person listed, and then you just say you understand nothing can be changed after anything, after you submit. I will say on that note, though, if you realize after the fact that there was some kind of error, I did ask the housing portal folks about this, and if you were to, ideally you want to, get it right the first time, but they take your most recent application. So if there is some issue, that's what's going to happen. And then you get a confirmation number to write down. This application's still open, so they're telling me application received. It's not a closed period yet, and whether or not it's been ranked yet. And then a little more of the same info. If you need to update, okay, well here it says, I guess that was bad info. It says if you need to update info, don't apply again, contact the agent. So there's that. And then browse more listings or view your submitted application. So that is how the process works. To the question about documentation, let me pull this up real quick. I mean, I guess to give a high level response, so to take it back a step, Portland and Oregon had a kind of similar preference policy where there were preferences related to your parents and grandparents. So we kind of consulted with them about trying to be really expansive about different documentation that could be used. And one thing they were doing was partnering with the local libraries. So we're partnering with the Berkeley Public Library, where the kind of librarian historian can help folks They have institutional accounts for ancestry.com, cityrecords.com. I forget all the names, but they're basically a lot of databases that have really varied things, like in terms of city directories that or records from ancestry that ancestry.com like aggregates a lot of different, centralizes a lot of different kinds of documents, so they can help people look for things. If someone wants to say, my grandparent lived in that area, it was a really long time ago. And so that partnership is also really helpful for the BART displacement preference. We do have a BART displacement database of all the records that we got from BART and digitized in terms of who was displaced. It only includes homeowners, and there may, we know that there were renters displaced and their info wouldn't be there. So for those folks and for some other folks who, for whatever reason, maybe don't have their name in the documents from BART, that would also be a place they could look that up. But yeah, if someone's getting contacted to verify a preference, the application that they get to do so has a really extensive list of what kinds of documents they can provide, and what kinds of support they can get with it, who the phone number and email of the library folks and stuff like that.
I had one other question, if you wouldn't mind. Are you familiar with the Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America? It's called NACA for short, and they give mortgages, and they try to help people renovate homes, and they try to have they have some sort of rental program or project as part of their thing. It came out of I think it came out of North Carolina, and they're in partnership with the Bank of America. Does AHPP find that would be helpful for those who are interested in small homes, single family homes, or the program for preferences that take you outside of the nonprofit market? Is that something that you all are looking at or doing or whatever? And also there are some federal guidelines for first-time home buyers who are seniors who've never had a home as well. So I was trying to find out how much overlap or interface there might be.
It looks like other people are familiar with NACA. I'm not, but I think for the affordable housing preference policy, the city can only apply to a policy like that to buildings that the city has some role in, like affordable housing that's funded by the city, or affordable housing where the city has some kind of like contractual relationship for restricting the rents. So that's how preference policies are typically structured, because the city is able to work with the housing providers, the affordable housing developers, and the private market developers for the BMR program to make those requirements of them. Yeah.
So one of the things that we are saying as we're strategizing around home ownership for the displaced Black community is affordable housing is a bridge, but we also have to create the ability to afford housing and to purchase housing, right? And so that's not part of this strategy. This is really finding rental units for people to be able to move into, to come back to Berkeley. We're working on a whole separate strategy to create bridges to home ownership for people in Berkeley. Healthy Black Families over the next 6 months or so will be convening a community leadership group to have this conversation and to develop a strategy that will begin socializing with the larger community. More to come on that. Any other questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome. I thank you all for the great questions. This has been a really, really thought-provoking session. We want to thank Misty Garrett and Anna Cash for being here with us to support this important conversation. This is, as Mama Ayana says, protracted work. It's not a flash in the pan. This is something we got to dig our heels into and be ready to advocate and pour life energy into over the arc of time. So you will be seeing a lot more information coming from Healthy Black Families around this. We hope that you will communicate this out to the people that you're touching. We'll be making another presentation on Sunday at the Equity Summit around this. So if you know other people who have questions, please invite them out. We're trying to spread the word. And again, thanks for being here today. We appreciate your presence and your life energy.
Omawali, call me. You
All right.
changed your number on me.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
wanted to drop it in the chat,
Oh.
Dr. D?
I'll drop it right now.
We'll take a shortcut.
Yeah, can I chime in on what you said, Mina, and say that the importance of us spreading this out to people who have ever lived in the red line community to be able to get certified for that and start the process to get certified, right? And persistence and searching. I mean, if you've lived there, but you don't really have a record of it, there has to be a way where we will find a way of getting the record of it, is the key to what we at Healthy Black Families have called, the right to stand, the right to return. So the more people, even if right now you're thinking you might not want to move back to Berkeley because XYZ, to have that option and just have that in your back pocket, should you be able to, should you want to, that would be great. Yeah, so I think it's important for us to try to return our community back. This is a good way of attempting that.
And I think we talked about this a bit earlier, but I just saw Harriet drop a question in the chat. What about people who are disabled and homeless? Do they have a preference for them? There is a preference for those at risk of being homeless. I'll let you go ahead and speak to that, Anna. I saw you unmute.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's true. And also, I did want to flag that the shelter plus care vouchers, are for folks who are homeless as well as have a disability in addition. So that's not this program, but it's, you may already be aware of it, but it's an important program to be aware of for the intersection of homelessness and disability. And we spoke earlier about the BMR program, where when there's new market rate buildings that go up, some portion of those are affordable units. Some portion of those units are reserved for shelter plus care voucher holders. So that's important to know about as well.
Okay.
And it kind of speaks to, I think, what you were just saying, Mina, of, this one policy is not a silver bullet, and there's many different ways that people, need different kinds of housing options, right? This is for lottery-based affordable rental housing. If we could crack how to get more affordable homeownership opportunities, it would be great to apply it there too, but it can't be applied to something that doesn't exist yet. So there's a need for so many different kinds of strategies, and so many different kinds of housing, and just more housing access, more housing options. So, I want to flag that this is just one piece of the puzzle, and we want to make it work as well as it possibly can and be as accessible as it possibly can. So I'm really grateful to you all for having us here and getting to hear your great questions.
Thank you, Anna. And I saw feedback coming through about people who had applied through the housing portal and hadn't heard anything back, etc. Another thing we're really interested in doing is getting your feedback about having used the housing portal. So if you'd like to share that, please reach out to us. And we'll gather that feedback, and we're actually in conversations with the people who are configuring and administering the portal, and we'll make sure to get that feedback to them. That's another important role we can play in this process. All right, thank you everyone. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you next time.